everyone, I love getting questions from you as viewers. They have been recently so thought out and so deep and so vast. I never knew there were so many questions about funerals that could be asked. I'm truly amazed. So I love, just keep throwing them at me. Today I'm going to answer some from Emilio. And his first one says, in one of your videos you mentioned that people are buried with an assortment of different personal items. What allowances or laws exist that protect families from burying the deceased with drugs that would otherwise be considered illegal? So there's no real law in place that says if a person is buried with something that somebody is exempt. However, unless somebody is in possession of that drug and they are seen putting it in the casket and someone has a video or sees that or reports them, that is when it's not that it's in with the deceased, it's that the person that was putting it in was in possession of that drug. However, if a police officer came through and there was drugs in the casket and they went through that casket, unless they can be traced back to somebody, technically the deceased is in possession of the drugs, and you can't really press charges on somebody who's dead. So at that point, it doesn't really go back on the family because the family wasn't the one necessarily who put the drugs in. So that's kind of where it lands, as possession is part of the issue, that because the deceased is the one who actually has them in their possession, technically there's nobody that you can prosecute for it. What are some ways funeral directors help relatives with a disability in coordinating a viewing of a loved one? For example, if a blind person wants to view a loved one pre-embalming. This is such a great question. I think I've talked about how I recently spoke with someone who is hard of hearing, and we talked about making arrangements, or I've talked about making arrangements with somebody who is blind, and how do we convey the contract and have them sign a contract? What is the legality behind those things? And I learned about a app that translates a document for somebody who is hard of sight, and so they can then know exactly what's on that document. So many things out there now. I have never actually facilitated somebody who was blind needing to do a viewing. I would imagine though, if that was the situation, I would bring them in and allow them to just physically hands-on that person. Just like if the person was living, so that they could feel them and know their structure, just as if when they were alive they felt their face and knew their structure, maybe from smell. Definitely their smell's going to have changed, but maybe there's still some scent there that the person recognizes. So I would kind of take cues from the person themselves as to what they needed. If it was somebody in a wheelchair and maybe the casket was too tall for them to see in, I would place the casket down on the ground so that they could see the person more easily. It's easy to accommodate some of these items. You just think outside the box, outside of the, I guess, what is a little bit of the norm. But the person who needs a special request needs to also be vocal about that special request so it can be met, rather than maybe the after the fact saying, oh, they weren't accommodating to me. We don't always know how to accommodate someone if there's not been a request made, or if it's something outside of our norm. So always voice. If you need a specialty thing to happen, ask. My brother's father-in-law once said that during his time working in a funeral home, he encountered a situation where people's backs needed to be broken because of severe rigor mortis. Is this true? Also using Coke bottles for stability of the neck. What are some less than ideal techniques that funeral directors use in preparing the deceased for viewing? So rigor mortis is not an actual breaking of a bone. It is a muscle that has basically frozen up from the proteins in it, and eventually those decompose enough that the rigor mortis lets go after about 48 hours. So when you're breaking up rigor, you're not actually breaking a bone. Once in a while, I have seen as you're moving a body, maybe pressing on your chest to maybe get somebody a little bit in position, that you do hear a sternum crack because the person is so frail. And it is the worst feeling in the world if something like that happens, because it's not out of force, it's just out of how fragile that person is. This can also happen if you're trying to maybe move an arm and the arm does fracture a little bit. You can hear a little snap because the bones are so brittle. It doesn't happen often, but once in a great while. And you never forget the sound, you never forget the feeling, because you don't want to hurt the person. Now, breaking a back, as you were saying, there are situations, if you get somebody who has a severe hump back, that they're severely bent over, or maybe they're contorted up from some sort of long-term disability, or that they've been in a bed for a long time. We often see where maybe an arm is contorted up like this, or hands are grasped together hard like this. That's how the person was naturally for a long extended period of time. It's not up to us to make that person look normal, because what is normal, truly? So unless the family says, I want their legs straightened out, if they're really crippled up, tied up against their body, then yes, we could, with the family's permission, cut tendons to straighten out legs and arms. I would have a very hard time doing that. I would really make sure the family wanted that, and that there was some logical reason, which to me, it doesn't seem like there would be. If the person was contorted up like that for a long period of time, let them rest. But some people do that, especially if there's full couch caskets that you're seeing the whole of the body. They may want that person laid out straight and, feet straight out instead of bent up next to their body. So there are some extremes like that. I'm not down with some of them, but it's at the request of the family or at the permission of the family. So we're not back there breaking bones and trying to make things happen because we want them to. I've seen some videos discussing tissue gas and its rapidly acting effects. Yes, tissue gas is nasty. I had an uncle who had been shipped cross-country, and during his viewing, his face was very dark purple. The funeral director said it was due to prolonged lack of oxygen. Is this true, or was it from tissue gas? As always, I can't really say exactly because I did not work with the body of your uncle. I think you said uncle, of your uncle, and so I don't know specifically, but tissue gas creates puffiness and kind of blown up, ballooned out eyes and mouth, and it literally creates gas under the tissue, so the face swells. It doesn't just darken a person. So if his face was dark, it typically is going to be because it turned purple when he was, shortly after death or dying, and stained the skin, and they couldn't get that circulation going again because the skin was stained. And yes, this often happens if the person dies and is laying on their face, or if they died quickly from maybe a massive heart attack. We see this sometimes, that blood kind of all went to this area, the chest and the head, quickly, and it kind of sits there for a little bit. And even after a few hours, sometimes that purpling or dark red can set in, and it's hard to get it circulating again. So that's some of the reasons. There are all sorts of circumstances and all sorts of things that can maybe cause the purpling, but tissue gas, typically not. You're going to get swelling more than that color discoloration, is what I found. So hopefully that helps, but thank you, Emilio, for your questions. Keep posting questions below, emailing them to me. That's what a lot of you are doing when you have kind of a list, is email them over to me, Kari@karinorthey.com. I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye.